Welcome to Talking Targaryen. Today we're talking about House of the Dragon, Season 2, Episode 2, Rhaenyra the Cruel. This podcast will of course have spoilers through this episode, but we don't read the book, so no future spoilers. We don't even watch the next time on preview.
I'm Gil, by the can't even read, but I won't say who.
I'm Gil, by the way, and you just heard the voice of Adam say hello.
Hello.
And Daniel.
Hello.
Let's start with overall thoughts. This week, I'm going to kick it off, and then I'll let one of you twos buzz in with your thoughts. Overall, I liked the episode. I think I liked it more than the first episode this season. I liked all of the tense interactions between characters. Very dynamic range of emotions. Look at Aegon. You had him screaming at the top of his lungs. You had him sobbing alone at his lowest point. And at certain points, you saw him kind of calm and collected, like he's in control. And then, of course, Otto, he's my favorite character on the show, and we get to see a lot from him, get to see a lot of manipulations. You see him pushed over the edge. I love Otto yelling, one of my favorite aspects of the series. And we got another sneaky castle kill. So that's 2 episodes in a row that ended with it. And I'm just worried now, if we go a third episode, it'll start to feel like a feature. And now our creepy castle kill of the week.
It's gonna feel like Clue.
Yeah, where you know the story of how Clue was sent to different theaters with different endings. So you might see it and see one ending, and I'll see a different one. They should do the same thing with House of the Dragon.
I was gonna make the same joke.
Yeah, and just to mess with people. Like when you sign into Max, it'll just stream a different version of the episode randomly. This podcast would be a disaster. So then Laris came in, and Dan's like, what? Laris was in this? I was looking forward to it all week. I didn't get to see any Laris. But go ahead, Adam. What were your thoughts overall? No, you know what? Daniel wasn't even on last week. Let's give him a chance to chime in.
I think for some
not
reason...
Not enough Laris.
There was not enough Laris. I was like a little bored during a lot of the episode. I think part of it is a lot of the incompetence is like frustrating to watch. But it's interesting, and thinking back on it, it's like interesting to see these dynamics. And I enjoyed some of the dramatic scenes, like where Otto, gets what's the term? Kicked out his hand, whatever. But
what was that term?
I don't know.
Kicked out.
Fired?
I think I'm just so frustrated by a lot of the characters. This is kind of what we talked about before, is I don't feel that connected to a lot of the characters. And so it's kind of easy for me to zone out. And I'm really only interested when something like super dramatic is happening. Like Otto losing his... What is the term I want to use here?
Patience.
Getting fired.
Oh.
I said
like
that.
when Otto gets fired. Yeah. So I don't know. I just don't... It'll be interesting to talk about it, but I just didn't feel that engaged during the episode, except in some of the more dramatic moments.
And what about you?
I actually, I thought it was a really strong episode. Much better than the first episode of the season. And I guess I'm starting to just get used to the characters. I'm not getting as frustrated when they make decisions that I think are bad ones, because I'm getting reacquainted with them after not watching for 2 years, basically. And so the way that they're acting feels in character and consistent. That still makes it harder to get invested, but it's becoming less of a barrier to my enjoyment.
Yeah, I think, Daniel, what we talked about last week, where I was trying to put my finger on why episode 1 wasn't working for me as well as the previous season. And I think in lieu of characters I really feel connected to, we have characters where, at least in the moment, we typically understand and sometimes empathize with what they're trying to do. And even in lieu of that, sometimes we have characters that are at least fascinating to watch, especially when they're in conflict with each other. And I felt like we had a lot of that this episode. But maybe as we go through the recap, you'll start to find a new appreciation for this episode.
Or maybe he'll turn us against it.
Yeah, we'll see which way it goes.
Yeah.
Are you going to be silver-tongued like Laris Strong, or inept like Aegon? Let's get into the recap. And this week, we're going to bring back the Sawcast format, where we're going to break up the episode. We're going to go through the greenhouse first, and then we'll go through Team Black. So this is not necessarily in chronological order. We're splitting it. So let's start with Team Green and King's Landing. I don't know if you remember last episode, but blood and cheese killed Jaehaerys, Aegon's son. So we start this episode with all the chaos right after that.
Wait, like the rat catcher's name is Cheese, right?
That's right. Yeah. I don't know if that. I mean, in this episode, they ask Blood, like, "Who is the rat catcher?" And he goes, "I don't know his right name." And so maybe Cheese isn't his actual name, but and actually, I think you wouldn't even know that's his name unless you read the book or you had closed caption turned on, which is how I learned it. And it's really useful for keeping track of the Erics too, because it'll like if someone says their name, it'll be spelled with an E or an A. But
and when they were having their fight and they're like, which one's which? You're screaming at the TV, just turn on the captions.
Yeah, exactly. What's helpful, I heard this on the official podcast, is that Eric with an A is on Team Alicent. So A for Alicent. Yeah, but thankfully, we don't have to worry about it after this episode. So yeah, a lot of chaos after Jaehaerys is killed. A lot of people getting pushed over. The running theme this episode is the small folk getting the wrong end of the stick. If there even is
that was the part that I felt was more poorly executed about the episode.
I agree, and there are specific moments I bet we're all going to agree on. In general, I like the theme. There were aspects of it that I thought were well executed this episode, but there were others where I'm like, we get it. Yeah. So we'll get to that. Aegon destroys Viserys' model of old Valyria while yelling, "I'll kill them! I'll kill them! This is war! I declare war!" And I like as soon as he said that.
Bankruptcy!
Or Homer when he runs in front of a horde of animals. Jumanji! I love after he yells, "I declare war," they shut the doors. I'm like, that's probably a good idea. You know, Cole's going to walk by and hear him shout, like, "I declare war." He's like, "Okay, we got the marching orders. Let's go." Who wants to chime in on this scene? I'll say,
I liked this scene. It was brutal to watch that model get destroyed. Viserys worked so long on that model.
No, he didn't.
Very nice.
He did not work. He watched other people work on it. You're just like Alicent. She's like, "Wow, you did such a great job in this." He's like, "Oh, I did not build this. I merely provide the instruction."
Oh, I didn't remember that.
But
okay, he still worked hard on it, providing the instruction. That's the real challenge, anyway. That was brutal. Generally,
he
though,
was the ideas man.
I really liked Aegon. Like, it was fun to watch him be angry during this episode. I enjoyed that.
Yeah, and it's fun to watch him be angry. You just feel the emotion of it. And then on top of that, I feel like this is a great visual representation of his character, where he doesn't care about history. So that's him destroying old Valyria. On top of that, it's one of his father's most prized possessions. Doesn't really care about his family legacy or anything like that. I think there's an idea that he was also ignored by his father. So this is him, again, just destroying one of Viserys's. He worked so hard on it.
And anyone else foreshadowing, maybe foreshadowing how much of the realm he's going to destroy in his quest for vengeance.
Yeah, Valyria was brought down by, the theory is that the 14 Flames, this big chain of volcanoes, erupted. That's what took down old Valyria, and new Valyria, or in a sense, House Targaryen, will be taken down by Aegon with a golf club, smashing the...
That is just a theory, though. No one really knows.
Yeah, precisely what took down old Valyria. But I know it wasn't a golf club, by the way, but I found it funny. Sometimes when I'm watching the show, I'm just not really thinking too hard, and just my immediate thought is, oh yeah, he picked up a golf club and he's using it to smash this model.
I was trying to figure out what that stick was. I think it was like a fire poker or something, but...
Yeah, that was my assumption.
Yeah. I liked it. I love the raw emotion. I think I don't normally... My bar for good acting is pretty low. Like, once you reach a certain level, I don't notice too much anymore. Like, oh, this person's really good, this person's okay. But in this episode, everyone stood out as very impressive in terms of the raw emotion. So I liked that. I like that there was some kind of payoff for the model of old Valyria. Like, it could have just been this little thing that we see Viserys working on, and then it doesn't really have a, it's like Chekhov's model.
Yeah.
So something happened with it, like it ended up having some greater meaning. That said, I wish they focused on it a little more. Like, there are so many scenes with like where they let the camera pause and they allow some silence to build up and to get the feeling of significance. And in this, they didn't really show it. You know, if this was like Breaking Bad, I could even see a cold open where you just see little fragments and bits of the model already shattered and broken on the floor. You don't really know what happened. You know, did like a dragon come in and like set the whole keep on fire? Was there a big battle? You don't know, but it gives you something to wonder about. And so in this case, like, they could have just shown it a little more and milked it for some more significance.
Yeah, which would have been interesting as sort of that would really have just been for us as the audience, because I think the retort to what you're saying, I think if you're someone who works on the show, would be that this scene is from Aegon's perspective. He doesn't care about that model. For him, it's not a big deal at all. So we're not focusing on it. But there could have been something between them and the audience to kind of give it some more focus.
Yeah, I mean, they do so many other things just for the benefit of the audience, that they could have done that.
We see Aemond in his room, and he finds a coin, which presumably it's a coin that fell out of Blood and Cheese's reward bag that Daemon gave him. And that's how later Aemond is like, Daemon was really after me. There's a lot of details like that kind of wash over me while I watch.
Well, how does that... is the coin even like necessary? Like, how does that change anything? Is it, you know, it's not like a special coin that like only can come from Daemon.
No, but don't you remember they were ransacking Aemon's room? I thought it was more so when they were robbing him, they dropped one of the coins they were stealing there. Like, and he noticed that the room was ransacked.
Yeah, so he okay, yeah, so he knows they wanted to get to him first, probably.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. Yeah, whether
which like it would be a safe assumption anyway, but it's like just some more evidence.
Yeah, agreed. And it's all part of setting up this tension between Aemond and Daemon. And I think we'll see a little bit more of that later in the episode.
Yeah.
You see Alicent and Otto together. She worries that the gods are punishing her, and Otto asks, for what sin? Doesn't answer yet. They'll come back to that. He says, we will mourn, but some good may yet come of this. And we find
they're
out...
doing a... Sorry, no, keep describing the scene, then we'll talk about it.
I was about to go to the next scene, so you can go ahead.
Well, they're doing a good job They're doing a good job in general remembering what matters to each of these characters. Because there's so much actual plot that's happening and so many... Like, this show, sometimes it feels rushed because there's so much happening in every single episode. That was going on in season 1. I was kind of hoping it would slow down a little bit this season, and so far it's not, which is okay. Like, they still have my attention, but they're doing a good job balancing that with remembering the emotions and motivations of the character. So Alicent, they're really not forgetting that, like, she's still kind of devout and like was raised to really be kind of religious and care about this stuff. So I think the guilt of her adultery, I guess, or whatever you would call it, is weighing on her even more than like the death of Luke, for example.
Yeah,
I think that's bothering her too. But it's like the guilt over her deviance, kind of.
Yeah, with Cole, and I think she would say the Luke thing. I don't know how much she blames herself directly for that. I think she definitely feels something. We saw her light his candle last episode, but the Cole thing is something that she is directly partaking in. Yeah. But I think, Daniel, you were about to say something.
Yeah, I mean, it's just interesting to see her motivation here and how, like, the cost this is imposing on her, right? Her Otto's loyalty is to his house and maybe in some way to the realm, right? Like, Otto is sort of looking out for the realm in some way, whereas Alicent's motivation is sort of religious, or just this idea of, like, she's clearly concerned about being good, but every step of the way she's being forced to do things that she thinks are wrong, and you can see it really tears her apart, right? Her relationship with her whole family is horrible. She fails as a mother in a lot of ways, and so I think that we're already seeing that create a rift between her and Otto and the way they want to do things. It'll be really cool to see how that develops.
Yeah, and I think in terms of her role as a mother, she's in a very strange position because the power dynamic should be that she is the mother to her children. But when your son is king and by all rights has power over you and everybody else pretty much, she just, there's not a whole lot she can do. And I think in terms of her motivation, for a long time, I think it was defensive against the perceived threat of Rhaenyra. She wanted to protect her children. And then the waters got muddied when she misinterpreted Viserys' last words. So now on top of that, in terms of honor, she thinks that she's abiding by his last wish by pushing for Aegon to be on the throne. So yeah, she's in a. I think there's a lot of accusations in this show about people's motivations. Are they pure or not? And I think the answer is usually a complicated mix. And I definitely have questions about Otto, but we'll talk about that later in the recap because I think he gives some more hints about what he's really after. I also think it's interesting to note this scene made me realize just how powerless Alicent is because all this stuff is happening by Aegon's hand, and then even here, Otto's coming in and talking about what their next steps are going to be, and it made me realize not only has she been somewhat powerless, but even Rhaenyra, who is theoretically in charge of her house, she's been somewhat powerless. Like what happened last episode was Daemon's doing, and it's what we talked about, this whole war of incompetence where nobody really has control. It'll be interesting to see if Alicent or Rhaenyra find a way to better take the reins. Oh yeah, and one more thing on that. I've talked about this theme of how hatred or rifts between characters can become externalized and start to have these more widespread effects. The fact that Rhaenyra and Alicent haven't been very in control, yet everything happening right now kind of stems from their broken relationship. It's pretty interesting to me. It's like, do they even still hate each other? It almost doesn't matter. That hate has now grown into this thing bigger than the both of them.
I think if they had the opportunity, I don't know if it would still be the case after the most recent events, but until recently, if they had the opportunity to just like push a pause button on everything and just be face to face alone without all these other influences, I think they would just both like grieve together and wish none of this was happening.
Yeah.
Well, and near the end of season 1, they sort of tried that, right? I forget what specific event happened that ended up tearing them apart again.
It was Viserys' last supper. When they were all sitting down to dinner, he took his mask off and just did his last best attempt to beg them to bury their differences and reunite as a family. And it worked. Alicent and Rhaenyra both raised a glass to the other. They were becoming friends again. And Rhaenyra was going to take her family back to Dragonstone and then come back herself. And the idea was that her and Alicent were going to sit down and essentially become friends again. But what you see in that scene is that it's kind of too late because right after they seem to be reuniting, their children start fighting. That's when Aemond stands up and does that toast. And he's like, to Jace and Luke, young, handsome, and strong, hinting at their true father. So it's a sad thing. It's like two ships passing in the night. There was a chance for them to be friends again, but it didn't happen. That was a subtle Better Call Saul reference, by the way. If anyone, any Saulcasters out there, comment if you got that reference. I'll reveal next week what I was talking about. Aegon storms into the council meeting. He's very angry. One of my favorite moments of the episode. Where were you, Cole? I was abed, Your Grace, having ordered the night's watch. Abed? Abed! Just more great acting from Aegon.
Yeah.
And it's also great when your feelings perfectly align with the characters, because that's how I felt last episode.
I was really impressed with Aegon's acting. Like he really he kind of stole the show this episode.
And I felt so tense before Cole had to answer because I was like, oh my God, how is Cole going to answer this question?
By the way, Tom Glyn Carney, that's the actor who plays Aegon. Thought we should give him a shout out. And he's very upset. He keeps saying, the queen is laughing at me. So he's taking this very personally. Larys, for some reason, the murder of his son he's taking personally. Larys comes in at a certain point. They caught the guy who did it, blood. They didn't get cheese yet. And Otto says, we must determine what happened, who ordered this. but in one sense, it does not matter. And that's where what he
This is
said
the
to,
opportunism.
exactly what he said to Alicent earlier, some good of this might come. Now it starts to become clear what he's talking about. We can blame Rhaenyra for their son's death, for Aegon's son's death. Say she's the one who ordered this, even if she didn't. Everyone's going to believe it, and we're going to win the favor of the realm. And that's big right now. I mean, every episode, it doesn't really get focused on, but a lot of the conversation in the council meetings is them pointing at different houses. And you'll see in one episode, Aemond will say, we need to get their favor. Cut to Team Black saying, we need to get their favor. So they're competing for loyalties right now. And if they can make Rhaenyra seem like a kinslayer, very frowned upon in this realm, then it'll get some people over to Team Green. Aegon is reluctant to go along with that plan because he doesn't even want the realm to know that Rhaenyra killed his son, because I will not be seen as weak. And it would look pretty weak if people can just walk into your castle and kill people. So the plan, though, is they're going to have a public funeral procession where they're going to bring Aegon's son through the streets and everybody can see the work of Rhaenyra the Cruel. And this is where you get to see some of that auto manipulation I love. So Aegon saying, I will not see my son dragged through the streets. And Otto says, not dragged, honored. And I, for one, will not let his death be in vain. So actually, it would be dishonorable if we didn't drag him through the streets.
Otto also, he definitely did well this episode with the spotlight. The acting was amazing. His standing up to Aegon public, like in front of the family, seems very miscalculated or not calculated. I think just like everyone else, his emotions are getting the better of him. And it's starting to feel like, even though we've kind of, we're past the point of having any honorable, ethical characters we can really root for, I at least want to see intelligent scheming and like want to see it play out. And Otto was kind of our guy for that for a while, but this season he's just losing control. And now it's starting to feel like Larys is the only smart one.
Isn't it interesting that Otto had this plan for so long of Aegon, taking the throne. Isn't it weird that Otto never developed a real plan or relationship with Aegon where he could actually control him? Was that hubris on Otto's part, thinking that he'll just listen to him?
I think it's part that. It's also, there's a big variable at play that he wasn't counting on. Otto thought they'd be able to kill Rhaenyra early on in this conflict, like before the conflict could even start. And I think he's underestimating Aegon, not in terms of skill or intelligence or anything like that, but I think Otto thought that he could push Aegon around. He's just a kid. He'll listen to me.
Well, and he thought Aegon would not enjoy being king or care about it. He would probably just want to get drunk and, hang out with his friends.
And I think that's largely true, but now that his son's been killed, he wants vengeance.
Yeah.
And that's a hard thing to manipulate or argue with.
Well, and if you remember,
Otto, I think maybe he thought Aegon got parented more by Viserys than he did, right? He comments on that later in the episode. Otto is sort of shocked, like, Aegon, like, don't you remember Viserys at all? Don't you respect his patience, these virtues he had?
Mm-hmm.
And I think he's surprised that Viserys didn't inculcate any of that in him.
Yeah, to see Otto referencing those as if they'll have any sway over Aegon shows how poorly he understands Aegon as a character.
One thing to remember, by the way, Otto was gone for a while. When he got fired his hand, and then I don't recall, I'd have to go back to see exactly how long he was gone before Larys burned his dad and brother alive to get Otto reinstated his hand. So there was a good chunk of Aegon's childhood where Otto wasn't there and couldn't cultivate that relationship.
But again, I also don't blame him for thinking Aegon would be disinterested in the power he has as king. Because if you think back to season 1, Aegon really just seemed like a total dud of a person. Like, I mean, I every time we see Aegon, like, inside the Red Keep, like near a window. I just remember when he stood naked in front of it, just like, I don't know what he was doing, but he just didn't care about anything. Like he was just basically a party animal.
You know what he was doing, right?
Oh,
Or
I
is
do
that-
remember now. Yeah.
I didn't know
Yeah.
if that was innuendo or you genuinely didn't remember.
No, I actually forgot. Now
Let's
I
just-
remember.
I'll put it this way. Normally, if Aegon were doing that, if he weren't a dud of a human being, he probably would have shut the blinds, maybe would have locked his door, and he would have felt more shame when his mom walked in without knocking.
Yeah.
He was doing that. He was, let me see if I can make this clear. No. Alicent goes to Helena and tells her the plan to take her son and bring him to the streets of King's Landing. It'll bring the common folk closer to us. Helena says, I don't want them closer. I don't know them. But we have to do things we don't want to do. And then Alicent, if you recall last episode, Helena, when she ran out of the room while they were beheading her son, she walked in on Alicent with Cole.
Yeah.
So here, Alicent tries to tell her, hey, what you saw last night, in my room, but Helena cuts her off. And
It
he's
wasn't
saying-
what you think. He was massaging me. My back was really sore.
Now, what were they doing? So let's just say, you would close the door,
It's like what Aegon was doing.
but it wasn't single player.
Yeah.
So Helena, she doesn't care. That's not what's on her mind right now. She just gives
Yeah.
Alicent sort of a cloak, I guess, the thing she wants Jaehaerys wrapped in for his funeral. At the procession, it works. It almost felt a little video gamey to me, where it was like, use dead child on wagon. Bing! You have now earned the loyalty of the people of King's Landing. Because immediately they're yelling very clear, I hate Rhaenyra! What she did to you is horrible. Kingslayer!
Yeah. So that was it's getting pretty jarring how quickly things jump from, hey, here's a plan that I think we should enact, to cut to the next scene. Here it is happening now. It's suffering a little bit from just how fast everything has to move, and also from that teleportation syndrome that we had in the latter seasons of Game of Thrones too.
Yeah, I felt a little bit of it last episode when Daemon goes to Massaria. You know a couple people that could help us get into King's Landing, right? Cut to, hey, Blood, come over here. Kill the prince.
Like in Game of Thrones, in like the first couple episodes, I think just planning for like the celebration of Robert Baratheon being in Winterfell, it was at least a full episode where they were just talking about the plans and the costs, and like really not glossing over the details.
I will say, though, overall, I did think it was a great scene, especially the focus on Alicent and Helena in the discomfort for both of them, especially Helena. And there was one particular shot that stands out to me where she kind of looks up, almost like she doesn't want to see this crowd around her.
Yeah.
And the veil over her face, it's so blended into her face that it almost looks like there's something messed up with her face happening. And to me, it just felt like the damage to her, losing her son, just what it's done to her. It's an kind of an unforgettable image that'll stick with me.
Yeah, I that one really kind of burned itself into my mind during the episode, and they really made me feel sorry for her. Like I felt some emotion during this scene, and so as much as I have some complaints about the pace of everything, it's hard to be too upset about it when the actual scenes are well executed.
Right. It's a question of how you got there and then the payoff, and oftentimes it's good payoff.
Yeah.
Daniel, any thoughts on
weird,
this scene?
the revulsion you feel, right, when the wagon gets stuck and they're all like reaching up at Helena and she's so uncomfortable. It's interesting. I mean, there's a lot. It's horrible that she and Alicent both have to be put in this position, right? They're mourning and they're forced to sort of be paraded around. But it's interesting that the revulsion gets placed on like the common folk.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like. What do you think that says? That's the choice they made in this episode.
It's my immediate reaction to that is I always think about point of view. And right now we're in the point of view of Helena and Alicent. And maybe it gives us a little window into how even the people who care about the common folk, how they view them. And it might give you a little window into later how Aegon could do something so cold as to kill all the rat catchers because he doesn't know which one's the guilty one. And to him, it's like, I think, Adam, you're the one who said they hardly even view them as people. Like, how can Alicent bathe with 6 people around her? It's because even her, somebody sympathetic, she, just because of the way she's been raised, might not look at the common folk and actually think of them as human beings.
Yeah. And I kind of shared her feeling of revulsion in that scene. But what's interesting is to contrast it with someone like Daenerys. I don't remember the exact scene, but there were many scenes where she was surrounded by common folk and people who were basically worshiping her and reaching out just to try and touch her. And I think at first, when she was younger, she was a little uncomfortable with it, but she ended up embracing it and naturally taking to the role. And that tells you the difference in the kind of leader they are and the way they perceive their role and the way they perceive the people that they're in charge of.
I think it also might just be it's a way for Hollywood to try and keep us down. Shows like this, shows like Succession, they really want to convince you that, trust me, being a billionaire or being in power, it sucks. You don't want it.
You don't want this. But when the wagon got stuck and they couldn't push it, through that little pothole, I was really thinking the head might fall off.
I knew you were going to say that. Yeah, I had the same thought. I feel like Game of Thrones. In Game of Thrones, the head
they would have
fallen
done
off.
it. They would have done it. I mean, in Game of Thrones, we saw burnt corpses of children hanging.
Yeah, I remember that. That was one I could never. Was all these characters that get rehabilitated later on. There's always the one sticking point where I'm like, Theon. Yeah, I know you didn't burn the Starks, but you did burn a couple of kids. It's kind of hard for me to go past that.
Yeah.
So what's the king up to during all this? What's Aegon been doing? They found blood. They tied him up, and he confesses to Larys immediately. Doesn't even torture him. Daemon hired me. A rat catcher helped. I don't know his right name. And he asks Larys, "Are you going to hurt me?" And Larys says, "No, but I cannot vouch for his grace."
Yeah.
And then Aegon comes in, hits him in the face. And again, Game of Thrones, I think we would have gotten like an extended violent torture scene. But here you get one tasteful hit to the face with his staff, I think. Maybe that same fire poker he used to destroy old Valyria. And then we cut away tastefully.
I really miss the gratuitous violence and torture. No, what I really miss is the showing the process of these things and just the slower pace of Game of Thrones. Like, I really, like, in my heart, miss the way that they would slow down and show us all the little things.
Yeah, I mean, we could be made to feel so much more revulsion around Aegon, right? Like building up to him torturing this guy. Like, it was just one small moment, and I felt tense and scared for the guy, even though he's a murderer, right? Yeah. We could have built that up much more. And then same thing with what Aegon did to the rat catchers. But again, they're kind of not focusing on these details, and they're not really making us feel it as much as we could.
Well, it's like they just have too many events to cover. So it feels like they're running through a checklist of here's all the things that have to happen this episode.
It feels
and
like
they're doing the best they can with it.
Last episode, you had blood and cheese. This episode, you have Eric versus Eric. And it feels like we got to get it at the end of episode 1 and at the end of episode 2. So they're rushing a little bit to get to that moment. And even this episode was extra long. I think like an extra 10 to 15 minutes. But it's still, and I'll say, to me personally, I felt pacing issues in the first episode. Didn't feel them as much here. I felt this one did slow down a bit. But you still could milk these things more. And there are a few specific things too later on I'll point out. And actually, Adam, you called the violence gratuitous earlier. But I did honestly feel it.
No, I was joking. Like, I actually think there wasn't enough.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, if they had shown more of the scene, I wouldn't call it gratuitous, because when it feels like you're shying away from something that's happened, then it feels like you're flinching the way a normal show would. But Game of Thrones is supposed to be unafraid to go there. And when you do, it does make it feel more real and grounded.
I think the cultural and political landscape has changed enough that we are seeing its impact on these things. So I don't blame them. I'm not like, I don't think the show suffers too much from not showing us a decapitated child, and showing us the head falling off, for example, or showing a long drawn out torture scene. But I do think the old Game of Thrones would have, and in many ways, that's what made that show special. And it was really like groundbreaking at the time. And just as an aside, like, if anything, this scene makes Aegon look merciful, because instead of torturing the guy, like, he whacks him so hard with whatever that was, that if he even survived it, he's probably not really conscious to really get the full benefit of torture.
That's what Joker said to Batman. You never start with the head. They get all woozy and they don't feel the next. And then Batman punches him and he goes, "See?" I assume there was a scene just like that, but we didn't get to see it.
Yeah.
One last thing, Adam. I'll just say, I do think Game of Thrones, it got some criticism. When you put in violence and nudity, things like that, when it feels completely unnecessary, then it starts to feel gratuitous. And I think Game of Thrones definitely crossed into that territory sometimes. But maybe now they've been so afraid of those criticisms, especially since they're doing a prequel to a show that by the end wasn't very well received. They're trying to be so careful. It's like Marvel right now, where they have Captain America 4 has been done filming for a while. Ironheart's been done filming for like 2 years. And I think they're so terrified to release anything. They're like, we got to get this right. Yeah. That's what this show feels like. So they might have overcorrected a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, on that note, in the scene later with Aemond in the like whorehouse, they do the thing where the hair goes down just to cover the exact right spots, and I'm like, that's actually more noticeable than if they didn't do that.
Well, the only naked person in that scene was Aemond. So his hair was covering.
No, before that, when you see the prostitutes dancing and doing a little show, everything works just right, that everything is covered. And it's not like I'm here like foaming at the mouth, like, no, I gotta see it.
Yeah, if you pause and go frame by frame, you actually can see it.
And I'll show you some clips I got later.
And you gotta make sure to lock the door, close the window.
You don't want to pull an Aegon.
Yeah. And so stuff like that, again, it's not like the show suffers from not having it, but it does suffer from being so noticeable when they're trying to avoid it.
In Game of Thrones, when Alicent got in the bath, you would have seen something. And I'm not saying I want to or you should, but you can't not notice it. Right, Adam?
You don't want to?
Back me up here. All right, so Aegon kills Blood. Presumably, we don't see a body. I assume he's dead. Aegon walks out down the stairs past Helaena, his sister wife, and they give each other a look for a second and then keep going.
Sister wife.
So I'll just say, I mentioned last episode that I listened to the official podcast where they kind of tell you the subtext. And sometimes they're saying something and I feel like I don't see it on screen. So right here, they were like, this was a loving moment between two people. They're the only ones who can understand the other's grief. Aegon, he grew up with Helaena, so they really know each other. And maybe he's the only one who really knows her. I don't know. To me, it felt like they've been kind of cold to each other. We've never really seen a warm interaction between them.
Yeah.
So they don't have any training in terms of.
I don't see any affection there.
Yeah. Instead, I saw it more as we have no experience comforting each other. So now, in the most difficult situation possible, where you need maximal comforting, I just don't know what to do or how to handle it. So instead, you just get a look. There's probably some understanding. We know what the other is going through. And then they keep walking.
I find that very relatable.
Yes. No more. Stick around for the Patreon segment to hear some details about that.
About my inability to feel emotion.
Let's go on a little Cole adventure. What do you say? So Kristen Cole.
If we must.
Yeah. Remember the first time we met Cole? Episode 1? We're like, this seems like a
we
hero.
liked him.
Yeah, he was like, he came from nothing, fought his way to the top. He defeated Daemon in that heirs tournament.
He was the only one with like actual military experience.
And now we're here. Cole goes into the room where Jaehaerys was killed.
Can you imagine like being his parents, like how disappointed you'd be in him?
I think he probably stopped writing them at a certain point. He was like, I was named Kingsguard. What happened after that?
And then I died.
And then I went back to my home planet.
Yeah.
So Cole's watching them take the bed apart. He sees the bloody mattress, and he feels guilty, clearly. Does he feel guilty? Well, in the next scene, he goes to Alicent, getting ready to take a bath, and she asks him, have you told anyone what we're up to? He says, what do you take me for? She says, one who seeks absolution. There is none for what I've done. Then she gets undressed after he leaves, gets in the bath, and does the classic depressed underwater thing, where she goes underwater.
Yeah, I when that happened, I was like, I've seen this so many times.
Yeah, it's kind of a cliche moment, but it's real.
It didn't bother.
Raise your hand if you haven't done that.
Yeah. I'm scared to go under the water.
I don't have a bath, so I just kind of waterboard myself. I stick my head under the sink and just run the water.
So you're just depressed.
Yeah. But I think with Cole, like, I think he's right. I don't think he seeks absolution anymore. I think he's telling the truth. Like, he's beyond that point. He's not really looking for it. I don't know what he wants anymore, though. I think he doesn't want absolution, but he wants redemption. And that's why he's willing to scheme and try to do these things on behalf of Alicent and her family. It's almost like once he's kind of gotten his hands dirty, he's like, you know what? I can just like, I'm in the mud now. I may as well roll around in it.
I mean, I don't think he's trying to get redemption, though. Like, killing Rhaenyra isn't... Like, I think he is still motivated by some type of vengeance or something on Rhaenyra. Like, I don't really see him caring about getting a better reputation or something.
No, not reputational redemption. More redemption in the sense of, okay, I've made a lot of mistakes. I've done a lot of bad things. If I'm... I've kind of crossed the line into unforgivable territory. I may as well try to accomplish something. And something that's not just for me. Something that feels purpose-driven. I think he's very misguided about the whole thing. And I think a lot of what's going on still has to do with his heartbreak from Rhaenyra. But
I think there's probably a mix, like with everything. There's, as much as he says, I'm beyond absolution, Adam, like you said, he's in the mud. I'm in here. I might as well get even dirtier. Doesn't care anymore. It's easy to say that, but I also think it's kind of like Aegon. He had no interest in the throne. And then as soon as an opportunity presented itself and he realized he could actually be king, suddenly he started to want it. And now we see a little bit of him potentially embracing the role. I bet you it would be similar with Cole, where if somehow there was a chance for him to like go into battle, maybe die a glorious death. What are you laughing at, Daniel?
I'm just picturing Cole now, like when he gets made hand, like really giving it a shot. Like he gets some glasses, he starts reading a lot. Like he really tries to do it.
He goes to Otto for help. Otto's like, "Are you kidding me?" But I do think a lot of this is sort of impulsive. He does still want some kind of petty revenge on Rhaenyra. He blames her for. There was a chance for him to have quote unquote honor by marrying her. She took that chance away from him. And
can you remind me what happened there?
Yeah, so basically he slept with Alice with Rhaenyra. Rhaenyra was with Daemon in the bowels of a pleasure den, and then Daemon freaked out and left her alone. She went back to her chambers, remember that playful scene where she steals Kristen's helmet?
Yeah.
And then they make love.
She's like, tee-hee.
Exactly. And he felt really guilty about it after because he has like an oath of chastity as a knight. Mm-hmm. So he asked her to run away with him so they can go get married. When she says no, she's like, but we could still have fun on the side. And he's like, you want me to be your whore? I thought marrying you would restore a monicum of my honor, but now it's too late. F you. And then he was so angry. He was so wound up after that, that when Laenor's love, Joffrey, goes up to Cole and he's like, hey, so you and I, we're going to be like, I'm going to be sleeping with Laenor, who's married to Rhaenyra, and you're going to be sleeping with her. How funny is that?
Yeah.
And then Cole kills him, beats him to death. Then he was going to kill himself afterward because he felt so guilty, and Alicent
this guy
stopped
needs
him.
a therapist.
Yeah, right. Like totally, just so crazy. I mean, most people in the Kingsguard, we talked about this, do not really keep their chastity oath anyway. He does this one thing, and it leads to him committing murder at a party. Like, why couldn't he just chill out a little bit?
And it seems like in the years since, he's done very little introspection. Or maybe he has, in the conclusion he came to, is he's become sort of a nihilist.
Yeah, I mean, he blames Rhaenyra for like taking his purity.
He's really this like dangerous mix of both very strong and powerful, but also has something to prove, kind of a chip on his shoulder. He's somewhat self-hating and nihilistic. It's just a really dangerous combination.
Yeah, as you know well.
It's true.
Well, Cole finds a new way to get out some of his feelings. He interrupts Eric's lunch. What's with all this dirt on your cloak?
Oh yeah, this scene was funny.
You probably got the kid killed. And Eric's like, where were you, Lord
It's
Commander?
just like, this is like the if I was like a psychology professor, I would show this scene to explain what projection is.
Yes. Well, and then Eric asks a great question.
Yeah.
Why Helaena, the queen, why wasn't she given a sworn protector? Surely once she ascended, and then Cole kicks a chair and the whole room awkwardly clears out.
Yeah.
You see people with like food in their mouth, like get up and walk away.
Now, at first I was like, this is how idiotic to do this in front of everyone. But then on the other hand, he wants to make a show of his response and how furious he is and how seriously he's taking what happened. And he wants people to see that he's taking control. And after a scene like this, it would be hard to think Cole is responsible. It would be much easier to think like Eric or the Kingsguard kind of failed their duty, but it's not Cole's fault.
Yeah, though I'll say this, if you're an employee and you see a manager storm out of his office, start yelling at one of your coworkers, like, how could you let this happen? I'd be like, this is definitely his fault.
Yeah.
Yeah, and how does Helaena not have a protector? If that was supposed to be Cole, I mean, why would Cole not be like executed for that?
Yeah, that's a question I still have, and I don't feel satisfied with the lack of an answer. Because I think, like, on the official podcast, they keep kind of joking, like, both these castles need better security. And I'm like, I agree.
But it's not a joke. It's true.
Yeah, it doesn't
How are we
feel
supposed
like,
to take it seriously?
like, do I read this as the characters screwing up, or is it the writers screwing up? And it feels like the latter. But, and then you ask questions like this, and it's like, hey, you can't criticize us for it because we acknowledged it. I'm like, yeah, you acknowledged it, but there's a difference between acknowledgement and a satisfying answer. Mm-hmm. Why didn't Helaena have protection? Why was it so easy to get in there?
Like, I want to see, and it doesn't have to change the plot. Like, you can still find a way for Helena's son to get killed and for all these other things to happen. But they should feel like they're happening in spite of people making good decisions to protect the castle.
You know who has wise words about this? Jackie Chan, by way of Chad Stahelski, the director of the John Wick movies. In an interview about John Wick 4, he quoted Jackie Chan saying how when you're coordinating a stunt scene or a fight scene, you might feel tempted, oh, we could do a spin kick here, but we just got to move that table out of the way. Jackie Chan says, no, do not move the table out of the way. As many obstacles as possible. Make the scene as difficult to pull off as possible, and then you'll have a great fight scene.
Yeah,
the same is true with the plot.
That's what makes it believable and more impressive. Because real life has obstacles every step of the way. I mean, every simple little task you want to do, doesn't it just feel like it's climbing up a mountain?
I feel like setting up the tech to record one episode of this show feels more difficult than murdering the king's son on this show.
Yeah, and so you can take something like this more seriously and get that feeling of investment that I feel we're lacking. But by showing the obstacles the way they really should be.
Yeah.
And
Well-
I mean, that's one thing that made like Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul such amazing shows was the focus. I mean, I mentioned the word process before. That's what I feel is missing from this show.
Like Mike taking apart his car, trying to figure out how they tracked him, which
Yeah.
in my importance of detail video, I was like, you see an unbroken 20 minutes of him taking that car apart.
Yeah.
Everyone in the comments is like, it was 4.5 minutes. I think
But it
I like
felt
messed-
like 20.
like which kind of goes against your point because that means it was excruciatingly slow. But in truth, seeing the process, the details, it puts those obstacles in the way, makes it more satisfying when you find a way to traverse them, and just makes things feel more grounded because life is details.
This is just making me so annoyed with that blood and cheese scene. Like that, like it could have been so much better.
Yeah. Though I think we're in the minority. My impression is that everyone loved it, but I haven't gone looking very hard for other opinions. I generally, with this show, I'm trying to be very careful about spoilers because I
Yeah.
know they're all out there.
Yeah. Well, there's so many things.
Just two idiots sneaking around a castle. Like, anyway, Adam.
There's so many things. I mean, it reminded me of like a play like Rosencrantz and Guildenstern or something, where it's just these like two doofuses going about like some silly scheme, when it's actually something really serious and like dangerous. That's another thing that I miss from Breaking Bad and Game of Thrones is the feeling of danger is addictive.
Yeah.
And you get tastes of that in this show, but there's so much opportunity for more that they're missing and glossing over.
Well, speaking of danger, in the next scene, we came dangerously close to seeing some genitals. But Aemond was perfectly positioned to cover everything up. So we see Aemond at a brothel, nude in the fetal position. This woman who runs the brothel, we met her last season when it was time for Aegon's coronation and they couldn't find him. Aemond went looking to all his usual spots. This brothel, Aegon brought Aemond here when he was a kid. And he met this lady and she was like, Aegon hasn't been here in years. But you are one handsome young. That was kind of the feeling of the scene.
Yeah.
And so it seems like that may have blossomed into something. Where she seemed almost more like a motherly figure to him.
Definitely.
So in this scene, Aemond does a lot of talking. He knows that Daemon was trying to kill him, but he was out. He was here with her. Aemond is proud that Daemon considers him such a foe that he would try to kill him while he's abed. And he does regret that business with Luke. I lost my temper that day. I am sorry for it. And then I think Madame Sylvie put... What's that, Adam?
This scene was a stinker.
Well, let me finish it, and then you
Yeah.
tell me why. Madame Sylvie reminds him that when princes lose their temper, it is often the small folk who suffer, like me, which I think just puts a button on that theme that we already talked about. These rifts, these wars, they get innocent people hurt, killed, or put into poverty. Go ahead, Adam.
This was like the exact opposite of show, don't tell. It's like the feeling I got was we need a way. We haven't spent a lot of time with Aemond. We need to show or explain what his motivations are, what his feelings are, what his thoughts are about everything that's going on. So let's just have him tell all of it to this person in a way that did feel out of character. Like it was a little jarring to see him open up and just kind of spill his guts and curl up in the fetal position and need this like motherly figure there. Now, it could be part of his character, but for the last while that we've known him, he's been this anime villain, badass, singularly focused on revenge, serious guy. And so this felt out of character to me. Now, it doesn't have to be. They could have built it. They could have done things in a way where it naturally felt appropriate, but they didn't put in the work.
Yeah, I think the whole point of the scene is, it's funny, we joke about him being like an anime villain, which is essentially a way of saying he seems like a character. And this is the scene that tells us it is a character. He is putting on this badass facade as part of his overcorrection for being made fun of when he was younger. He wants to get revenge, so he needs to become this person. But I think to your point, this is sort of a whiplash way of doing it, of just saying like, oh, by the way, it's all a facade, rather than showing cracks in the facade. And then this scene would have felt more earned.
Even if they just gave us one scene, like an intermediary scene, to show Aemond has like a difficult conversation with someone, and like you can see either cracks in the facade, or you can see how hard he's trying to put on this appearance. But if there was some evidence that it was hurting him or getting to him, and then he seeks comfort by doing this, it would feel a little more natural and earned.
He like stormed into the council meeting last episode. Maybe before that, you see him in the hallway and he's like, okay.
Yeah.
Hey everyone, I'm Aemond.
Yeah. Actually that would have been really, you should be writing this, because like if they just showed even a 10-second segment of him outside the room going and then going in, like that's show don't tell. That tells you a lot.
I don't buy that at all. Okay, well, I definitely think I thought Gil was joking.
I was joking.
Like I think okay. I think we need more.
I think we need more subtle ways to do it.
Yes, we definitely need more show than tell. I agree, but I
think what I described isn't a bad version of that.
No, I don't think Aemond's persona is like the breathing deeply or whatever before going in there. I think his persona is...
Wait. Let me just say, that's not how I thought of him either. But after seeing this scene, I don't know what else to think.
No, so here's what I think. I think Aemond is confident. I think he feels confident playing this anime type role. I actually think that's pretty natural to him, but he does have a need for some type of like motherly nurturing, because we know he like didn't really get that from Alicent, but he even approaches that in kind of an anime like alpha male way, right? Like he's paying this woman that he can order around to serve that role, and then she sort of makes a move on him and he says, no, not here. Like he's getting this motherly nurturing thing, but he's still in charge. Like I do think it's sort of consistent with his character.
I don't know, but he's smart enough to know that these people can't be trusted. Like these like whorehouses and everything are rat's nests of spying and information gathering, and like for him, he can't afford to be vulnerable with someone like that.
Well, I don't know what he shared that's can't be told to anybody else.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't know. I think even just showing vulnerability is like not a smart move if the whole thing he's trying to do is spark fear in his enemies.
Yeah, you never know who you can trust, but the impression we get from the fact that Aegon used to go here when he was younger, Aemond's been with her for some time, it seems like he's at least gotten to a point where he trusts her. Whether or not that's a good idea, we'll see. I think...
One other thing. That happened a long time ago. That was 2 years ago for us. Like, I think most people viewing this probably didn't even remember this motherly character,
Madame Sylvie.
Yeah. So if they at least, I don't know, make it seem like something that's more routine for him.
They did make it seem routine, I thought.
Yeah,
well, he seemed very comfortable.
Well, it seemed normal to him. But it just, I guess what I was saying before, it felt jarring and it didn't fit into the character of Aemond that as I know him now. Now the scene changed my perception of him, but in a way that I found like whiplash, like Gil said.
Yeah, I think I'll say I didn't walk away with very negative feelings about the scene, but Adam, hearing you, I don't disagree with all of your criticisms. I think in general, when you're going to do something that alters your perception of a character or gives you new information, you don't want it to feel like this is only happening for the sake of the audience. You really want it to feel like this is something that would happen whether or not we're watching. And I think to pull that off, it's almost like you need to dilute that scene, because you want a plot to just be the essentials, but you also need details around it to make it seem like not every line and moment is a big character revealing moment. Things are happening, and then some of those things are important. And I guess it's kind of subjective if you feel like they did enough or not. Was this too much to say, like, look, here's this other side of Aemond you didn't know about, and it feels like we just came up with this? or did you see hints at it and now you're seeing
Yeah,
it
and
more
I guess
fully?
the hints were too distant for it to feel like it was hinted at. It was just too long ago for me. And the other problem was just I couldn't get over the feeling that this is a very convenient way to just have Aemond tell us what he's thinking.
Just spill his guts,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree with all of that. Like, I think it probably could have been more subtle. I think this is another case where more details, like moving slower and just giving us more details, would have made this feel a lot more natural.
Yeah, I think it's we'll move on in a second, but I think balancing so many different characters is part of the challenge.
Right.
And
Well, and
I love the scene. I thought it was pretty perfectly executed. So let's move on to that.
I just like stepping away from that because all I've done is focus on like the criticism, but in the end, it's still a part of the show and it still says things about his character. I don't want my annoyance to get in the way of actually talking about suspending our disbelief and talking about the show. So, what does this say about his character? Like, just that is it? So, I kind of agree with Daniel. It's not a facade, the sort of badass thing, but it does show the need he still has for a nurturing presence, I guess. And
Well, I think it shows you see he has guilt over Luke, and I think that's not something he would ever admit in his anime villain persona. I think that's an example of where, to some degree, it is a facade because he cannot let the realm know he feels guilty about that. He wants to own that action, so people fear him. Kind
Even
of like
though-
Rhaenyra.
if that would go a long way toward creating peace if he was willing to do that, but that's not what he wants.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
I don't know. I mean, if they want to accept sort of guilt for killing Luke, I mean, you'd have to give up Aemond, right? You would have to like execute him as a show of penance. Like, I don't know if that's a path to resolving the conflict.
Yeah, and anyway, at this point, that's such a far gone option anyway.
Yeah, it's way out there.
On top of that, I think the fact that he's proud that Daemon considers him a foe shows that he has some personal investment in this, where he doesn't. It shows that he cares, and that's another aspect of the quote unquote facade. It shows that he cares. Like he wants to seem like I'm above it all. I just want to get my revenge, but really he's like, I still care what Daemon thinks. I like that he considers me an enemy.
And I think this maybe also helps us understand how Aemond will behave in the future, right? I think he needs sort of motherly approval of some type, or he's looking for approval from other people, even Daemon in a certain way. That makes me think maybe in the future, if there's rifts within Team Green, he might just do what Alicent wants, right? Like he needs that type of approval.
Yeah, unless he feels like he hasn't gotten enough of this sort of approval from Alicent that now he's sought it elsewhere. Maybe it's too late for her to provide it.
Yeah. I think there's no way that both Aemond and Daemon live through this series. One of them is going to have to kill the other. Like, I think they're setting it up to be a personal like foil against each other.
My bold prediction, and this is always with a prequel, like Better Call Saul, you introduce new characters. Are they alive during the time of Breaking Bad? I'm going to say that in the time of Game of Thrones, none of these characters are alive.
It's a bold prediction. Let's see if it pays off.
Just one last point there, though, of this Aemond-Daemon face-off. They are foils to each other in a lot of ways. Again, here, Daemon is also desperate for approval of others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Well, Madame Sylvie talked about how the little folk get affected when princes get angry. And as though on cue, we cut to Hugh, who has a sick child. Him and his wife can barely put food on the table. The king's promised some money, but when? When's that money going to show up? We don't know.
Yeah.
These small folk are suffering.
This stuff just feels shoehorned in there. And for my complaints about the pacing...
It's Hugh horned in there.
Yeah, it's like they're so desperate for time and for like to keep up the fast pace that if they didn't feel, again, I kind of talked about the broader world landscape in which this show is coming out. I think without that, they probably would have felt less pressure to shove this in, and then giving us more time for the stuff that I'm talking about, like process and detail. That said, I don't know where this is leading yet, and I don't think we've seen the last of Hugh. So
Yeah.
maybe there'll be a payoff, but it kind of reminds me of in Game of Thrones in the what was the name? I forget the name of the episode, but Hardhome, where the zombies basically, the White Walkers and everything stormed this village, and from the early part of the scene, you see this one wildling woman with her child, which you've never seen her before, and they try to make it into the significant character, and from the moment they show her, like, oh, she's gonna die, and they're introducing her just to try to tug on her heartstrings later.
Yeah, I think this scene especially sticks out because it does the most cliche thing of they have a sick child they're trying to take care of.
Yeah.
So it just felt very like, look, see, the small folk are suffering. It goes back to what I said earlier about I feel like you need this scene to be diluted. And one way to do that would be to have, if Hugh was a character that we were following up to this point and we saw him suffering, we didn't like to see him suffering because we like Hugh. I like Hugh, but I don't feel connected to Hugh.
I don't really know Hugh.
Does anyone ever really know Hugh? Well, we do see more of Hugh. So a little bit later, he's walking around. We see him steal an apple out of someone's backpack bucket thing, which, by the way, in a time of starving when everyone's stealing from each other, you got to get a top for that back bucket.
Was that Hugh?
That was Hugh. Yeah, I didn't catch it at first either until I rewatched it. But when in the scene where you find all the rat catchers hanging, the guy who shows up and goes, "Who are they?" That's Hugh, and that's why they show him stealing because he's so hungry. Just like Prisoner 246.
I just thought it was a random guy.
No.
Okay.
How dare you?
I don't know. His face
Hugh.
didn't look anything like.
How dare Hugh?
Is it just me? Like he didn't look anything like Hugh from the scene before.
No, I mean, it is the same. It definitely looks just like him. Yeah. But it happens later in the episode. I'm putting the scenes next to each other now for clarity.
Yeah.
But yeah, in the episode, it had been long enough that you would be forgiven for not recognizing him.
No, see, Adam doesn't care about the small folk. Adam, he sees them; they all look the same to him.
Well, that's why I find Aegon such a character I can relate to and support.
A kindred spirit.
Yeah.
So he steals an apple. He sees a bunch of rat catchers hanging. And what did they do? Who are they? Rat catchers in the king's employ. What did they do? And the lady doesn't answer him. Now, Daniel, you got frustrated here because they kept doing the thing where somebody would ask a question and the person wouldn't answer. And they're just like, okay, I guess this conversation's over. It's like in other shows where no one ever says bye on the phone. They just hang up. I had more to say. But I guess
they'll have a character say something significant or like really poignant, and then the scene will end. And it's like, well, the conversation didn't actually end there.
Like, Damon,
you just cut it.
What do we do if we can't find Aemond?
Well, that's
just
exactly
smile and walk away.
That's exactly what I was going to talk about. Is like they left that ambiguous to us. Now it's pretty safe to assume what he said, but like it feels very artificial to say we're going to cut the scene right there when we spend most of the show showing you things for your own benefit as the viewer, which already feels kind of excessive. But then we're just gonna like put you on this little roller coaster that we're crafting specifically for the viewer that is disconnected from what's happening.
So I'm gonna disagree on the Daemon moment. This is when it doesn't feel cheap to me, is when ambiguity is used to put you into a certain character's point of view. And so when we're with Rhaenyra in this episode, and she thinks that Daemon may have given the instruction to kill Jaehaerys, we don't know because she doesn't know. Yeah. And yes, we were with Daemon when he gave the order to Blood and Cheese, but we would learn about that later anyway because that truth comes out. So I think it's a balancing act.
That's a good point. That's a good point. But it would that point would resonate more with me if Rhaenyra felt more like a main character, which so far she doesn't this season.
Yeah, it's strange with this show because it has so many characters, have people kind of move in and out of the protagonist role. Like in season one, it felt like Rhaenyra was barely a character for 2 or 3 episodes.
Yeah. So to say that it's actually, it makes sense because it's putting you in the perspective of another character. I agree with that point. It's just not consistent enough to really like fully sit well with me.
I do need to point out a moment in this scene. We see the little doggy that Cheese kicked
Oh,
last
yeah.
episode, and he's looking up at Cheese's corpse hanging, which in my mind, that's a nice little piece of revenge for that dog. But
Yeah.
he's whining. The dog's crying. But this
Well,
is
that's
what
just
you
how
wanted.
loyal. This is what's so great about dogs. They'll just love you no matter what you do to them.
Yeah, but doesn't that cheapen it? Like, he loves me, but like he would love
Yeah.
Cheese, apparently.
Well, that's why. I mean, it was just a few years ago that I finally made friends with like a cat, 2 cats. And I didn't understand the big appeal of cats, but once you earn the love of a cat, you're like, wow, like that actually felt like an accomplishment. Whereas a dog just loves you immediately. And the feeling is mutual.
Ironically, to get the cat to love you, you give them cheese.
Yeah.
Well, Otto confronts Aegon. Basically, what the heck? What is wrong with you? You hung a bunch of rat catchers. We, with your child's blood, we bought their approval. With your mother's bitter tears, we suffered through this, and we won the loyalty of the people. And now we lost it, because Aegon didn't know which rat catcher was in on the plot, so he hung them all. And so he took that PR win and threw it away for petty revenge. And Aegon, once again, second time this episode at the least, he says, I will not be thought weak. And I'm like, Aegon, is that even a full sentence? I get the point, though. And he goes, you know who did something about all this? He's not just sending ravens like you, Otto. Cole, over there. And Cole's like, huh, what? And Otto's like, what exactly has Cole done?
Yeah.
And Aegon has to admit, well, I don't even think we glossed over this earlier. when Cole went up to Eric and started giving him a hard time about his dirty cloak, he also told Eric, you need to make this up to us. This cloak is so dirty.
Yeah, you need to fix this thing that you had nothing to do with.
You need to go kill Rhaenyra. How am I going to do that? You have a twin that works for Rhaenyra. So you're going to go pretend to be your twin, get close, and kill her.
You know, I can't believe it didn't occur to me that something like that would happen.
Yeah.
Same. I think Alun, I can't remember if he called it or if he also said like, oh, I can't believe I didn't see that coming. Oh. So Otto's like, what has Cole done? And they tell him the whole plan. And I love when Otto, he calls it a prank. He's like, so you decided to do this prank.
I like that, yeah.
And suddenly Otto loves Viserys by comparison. Mm-hmm. And he says, you know, he had his patience. He had his dignity.
When is Otto going to look in the mirror and be like, man, I screwed up?
Well, also, have you ever looked at Viserys and thought dignity?
No.
But that is kind of what was happening in that scene, right? Because you see a reaction. Yeah, you see a reaction by Otto, and I think it was like all of a sudden he is he even says this. He's realizing what the realm lost in Viserys. And maybe he's seeing some of the cost of his behavior.
Yeah, it's
his
hard
own behavior,
to read.
I mean.
Yeah, it's hard to read into it a sense of personal responsibility on his part, but I think there's enough there that you can assume he's aware. That he
and there's at least a newfound appreciation. Like, I think he looked at Viserys as weak. I think a lot of people did, and now he's seeing, and he probably saw it before too. But this is really emphasizing for him there was something good in Viserys. He did want to make people happy. He never wanted the realm to tear itself apart. And I don't think he would do any of the stuff Aegon is doing right now.
And he was open to reason and open to guidance.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think I was trying to think through Aegon's motivation. And he's multiple times this episode emphasized how much he does not want to be thought of as weak. And I think some of that comes from an overcorrection. People saw his father as weak. And I think Aegon is a little too young and inexperienced to understand what is the opposite of weakness. For him, it just means
it's like throwing a tantrum.
Yeah, violence and action without much forethought. When really, there is a strategic way to win this war. If he wanted to be the opposite of his father, he would win this war and he would unite the realm. But to him, it's, I'm going to kill all the rat catchers. There's also Larys might have poisoned him a bit when he implies that Otto is manipulating him. If Otto is saying,
Definitely.
let's send ravens and take it slow, well, the answer must be the opposite. Let me kill all the rat catchers.
And do you remember what Larys says specifically to Aegon? He says, Otto was your father's hand. And then Aegon uses the exact same line when he fires Otto.
And the funny thing is, he didn't make Larys hand. So he fires Otto and then gives a position to Cole, which I wonder if Larys might not even be that upset by it, because he might still be able to manipulate both Aegon and Cole. I think he can probably improvise.
2 major issues with that. 1, obviously, he only chose Cole because Cole was the other guy in that room. And 2, how do you pin on armor? There's no way you can get that pin on there.
I was like, is it magnetic? Like,
I had both of those exact same thoughts.
That is so funny. Like, yeah, later in the day, I wasn't even wondering how. I just was imagining pinning it onto like one of the metal flaps on his body armor or whatever. And I was like, I bet it would make a really satisfying like clink sound when you put it on. Yeah, he also, I think, Cole is the one who is going to get the revenge. He's going to kill Rhaenyra, so he gets to be hand. On top of when he turned, he was in the room, I guess.
So here's another thought that I had. Part of Otto's rage, which was unspoken, is part of it that like the whole rat system. There's something there that's of strategic value, right? That Larys is kind of in charge of. I don't know if there's something supernatural going on, but it's part of this like spy network. And I don't know if Otto's aware of it, and I don't know if the rat catchers have anything to do with it either. But I wonder if killing all of them was like burning down the banana stand with all the money,
Wait, so you think that the rats have like a telepathic connection with Larys, and he's using
it's possible. No, it's actually possible. We know there's
explain his rat-like features.
I mean, it actually might. Like we know we haven't seen much we haven't seen anything supernatural in this show. But in Game of Thrones, I mean, there are people who can see through the eyes of animals. And
that's
like,
true.
I think I can't remember if green seers specifically are the ones who do that with the animals, or if they just have like premonitions. In
it was
their dreams,
the Animorphs. I think.
Yeah, exactly. But I actually think there's something going on with the rats that's more than just vermin.
Well, and that's why they've been talking about these rats. That's why, all of season 1, they were also talking about the rats all the time. We knew about the rat catchers.
So,
I mean, facetious.
Yeah, I know. But I know they just kind of introduced the rat catchers like in a way that felt convenient for this season. But Larys definitely has some kind of connection with the rats. There's some importance with the rats going around the castle. I think it's possible there's something supernatural happening that helps him have eyes and ears everywhere through them. I don't know if the rat catchers are part of it.
Did we see a connection between Larys and the rat catchers that I'm forgetting? Or this is you speculating?
Speculation. That's why I'm saying I don't know if the rat catchers have anything to do with it. But I just can't ignore the feeling I had when Otto first got upset about the death of the rat catchers. My feeling in the moment was this is 50%. He's upset from the PR standpoint of how this is going to look and undo all the goodwill they got from the people. But then the other half might be you just threw a major wrench in our little internal spy network. That said, I don't know that Otto knows about it, and I don't know that the rat catchers actually have anything to do with it. It's just where my mind went. And this is the kind of stuff I like thinking about, because I liked for most of Game of Thrones, I liked the way supernatural stuff worked, which was it's there, but it's very mysterious and hard to wrangle, and it's usually like just a little sprinkle of something into a scenario. It's not the main driver.
It's a good point. I hadn't thought about it, but we've seen very little aside from dragons. We haven't really seen much supernatural. I guess aside from dragons and Helena's prophecies, we haven't seen much.
Yeah.
Well, Otto leaves to Alicent, complains about Aegon. She kind of defends Cole. She says, "Look, Aegon, he's crazy. Cole, he's very loyal. Trust me." And Otto says, "But he has not the long view. which I love the way
Yeah.
Otto speaks. Otto's going to retreat to Old Town, where Alicent has a son who will take more kindly to instruction. Darren may yet help us in the weeks to come. So this is a son that was never mentioned, that we never heard about. People who read the book were wondering in season 1, oh, I guess they wrote out Darren, Alicent's other son. But it turns out he's here. He's in Old Town. I feel like
Darren's. No,
well,
go ahead.
So Darren is Alicent's son that we just hadn't heard about. And Otto is saying he's going to go back to Old Town where Alicent's son is living, and he might be able to help us here.
Who's the dad?
Viserys.
So we never saw Darren.
Yeah, presumably during one of the time skips, they had another son and sent him to Old Town.
Okay.
Which I feel like in any other show, we'd be like, what? Like imagine in Breaking Bad, season 5, Walt's at the table talking to Walter Jr., and then he turns and the camera pans over to like, and Larry, what do you think about all this?
It's Steve Buscemi. He's like, hello, fellow children.
But also, doesn't Darren like not sound like the name of somebody in this universe? It's like our other son, Brad.
Yeah. Or like Hugh.
Well, you got Carl, Eric, Jason. I mean, it might have been like Daron. I'm not sure if I'm saying it right.
Daron. There's all these names. I mean, I can't fault the show for this because it's all coming from the books, but like, it is funny how many of these names just sound like common names we have today.
Yeah,
Alan,
Otto, the bus driver. What is this? The bus driver from The Simpsons. Otto says, "Yeah, go ahead."
Just before we move on from the scene where Otto loses his position, this is just like another example, I think, of things spiraling out of control for him that he didn't anticipate. And I'm pretty surprised at his inability to keep his composure and just continue scheming in a dispassionate, like less emotional way. It's frustrating because I want to see it.
Yeah, you have to wonder if there was a way for him to control Aegon. It's hard to imagine what that would have looked like. Especially after the death of Jaehaerys. But I'm sure he's wondering that now too.
Yeah,
and I
this
think
outburst doesn't help anything.
No, certainly not. And there might have been a way for him to get out of this without losing the position of hand.
I mean, I think there definitely was. On Aegon's motivation, like Aegon also probably wants some type of approval, right? Aegon keeps saying he doesn't want to be seen as weak. Like that is how Alicent and Otto saw him as a kid, right? Like they kind of ignored him and looked at him as a fool. Like maybe Otto could have fed his ego just a little bit, like give him something. And he
even in the last episode, we saw that.
Right,
when he was holding court.
It might have been more effective last episode when Otto starts to walk toward him and instead doesn't. It wasn't exactly a pat on the back. It was the lack of a stick. He was like, I whacked you a second ago for doing the wrong thing. And now when you did the right thing, I didn't reward you. I was just kind of like, oh, okay, good, finally. So maybe he could have played with that some more. But the plan now is to go back to Old Town, essentially wait for Aegon to chill out, and then probably go for a round 2. Otto and Alicent can take another stab at guiding things properly. Specifically, Otto says, the young are peacocks, all shrieking in feathers, but we will yet prevail and bring forth peace. I still believe it, as long as you and I hold fast. And then Alicent says, I have sinned. And Otto's like, I do not wish to hear it.
Yeah.
Like, what now? Just, I don't care. And then after she leaves the room, he does the thing where you like clasp your hands together and then press them against your forehead when you're really stressed out. And then he takes a bath and goes underwater. Or he runs.
And then he opens up the window. He stands up by the window.
And he does the thing that normally when you do it.
It's a single player. So why? So Alicent wants to confess. And do you think Otto's just like, I can't take it anymore? Like,
that was my read on it. I just think, I think he just doesn't want. He just doesn't want any more stress or annoying things to deal with. And I think that he knows that she is somebody very sensitive. He probably, I didn't even think of that. He probably knows what's going on between her and Cole. He also knows that she is very worried about sinning and being honorable. So he might look at this and say, whatever is weighing on her, it's not a big deal. I just don't want to worry about it. I don't want to rock the boat right now. Her and I are getting along. And honestly, to me, it was just like, yeah, just like enough. I just don't want any more.
And I don't think he like cares about the religious stuff either. But relatedly, like what even is so wrong about what Alicent is doing? Like,
Well, I think Cole is not supposed to be. I mean, isn't it a whole chastity thing as a knight?
I mean,
yeah,
in
that's probably the
theory,
main thing.
in theory, like I think he could be executed for violating that oath.
Yeah.
And she's caught, like she's playing a very direct role in that.
And not to mention specifically, if they hadn't been abed together last night, maybe Cole would have been up and about and Jaehaerys wouldn't have gotten killed.
Yeah. So I think Otto knows. I think he has to know that this is going on. I don't think it's a very high priority for him in terms of the list of problems. And I also wonder if he wants to say, like, you got to just like keep this to yourself. Like, stop looking to like purify yourself or confess these things. Like, we have bigger problems to deal with. And you're not going to do yourself any favors by speaking about this.
Yeah.
Now I'm reading a lot into it, but
no, but I think we have a lot of evidence for that where in the last season, Otto had made a comment about Alicent of like, I didn't think you had it in you, but I'm glad to see you do. Like when I think when Alicent attacks Rhaenyra after the incident between all their children.
She cuts her.
Yeah, and I think Otto has that perspective of like enough with his childish religious stuff. Like just do what needs to be done, quit acting all guilty and getting weighed down.
Yeah, I think that's right. After this, Alicent goes to see Aegon, but she finds him doing something disgusting alone in the bedroom, so she walks out and leaves. He's crying like a little baby. All right, next scene. So, this was a good scene. I mean, it was emotional. I don't have a whole lot more to say about it other than clearly Aegon is suffering. He's mourning. We saw the anger side of it. We saw him lashing out, killing all the rat catchers, and now we see the sadness. And he does it alone because he's trying to put on that he is king. He's trying to be strong. We've seen he doesn't want to be seen as weak, so this is where he gets to be weak.
Yeah, and we're seeing, Alicent's sort of failure as a mother here, not just in the fact that she doesn't go to comfort him, but this is a sign that, like, Aegon is struggling. He's upset. If Alicent was able to play that motherly role, she probably could have controlled him better. And that would have been a great asset to Team Green.
Yeah, I think there's some truth to that. I'm not 100% sure that it was wrong for her to leave him alone, because I think he very intentionally wanted to be alone right now.
Why was his door open?
Was it open or did she unlock?
He's never much cared for that.
Yeah. I think there's an argument to be made that sometimes somebody wants to be alone and they don't realize that what they need is to not be alone. But it's I think at least right now, if you were to ask Aegon, he'd be like, "Yeah, I'm glad she walked away."
I don't know. I mean, nobody comforts Aegon this whole episode.
He's a jerk. He's killing rat catchers left and right.
He needs to go see Madame Sylvie.
See the thing, I was thinking that Adam, like Aemon can go to Madame Sylvie for comfort, but I feel like Aegon has so sullied his relationships with all those people. Like they just don't have an emotional connection. I think for him, he was using the brothel as a brothel. So I feel like that's not where he'd get the kind of comfort he's looking for right now. Alicent, so she leaves Aegon alone, finds Cole in her chambers, smacks him, pushes him, and then their passions boil over. It's a bit cliched. I've seen this scene before. It's an oldie but a goodie, right? It's a cliche for a reason. The girl smacks you, and then things go from there.
Yeah, that's how it always starts.
I don't know.
So
thoughts?
she really, I mean, I think they're both trapped in a vicious circle of guilt, stress, like self-hatred, and then relief by kind of reproducing the act again. Like,
yeah, the thing I can't tell is how much of this passion is a response to what happened. Like, is she somehow excited by the idea that Cole took action and sent someone to kill Rhaenyra? Or would this have happened either way? I don't know. I said it last episode, and I'm just feeling the same thing again this episode. I need to spend more time with the two of them outside of them just performing the act where you're just seeing the sort of passion, but like a conversation between them, a better feel for what they're both getting out of the relationship. All right, you guys want to head over to Dragonstone?
Yeah.
All right, let's go to Dragonstone. Smell that dragon? Dragons probably smell terrible, like the zoo. Feces everywhere. Probably like in Jurassic Park, that big pile. You remember that?
I do.
We must be
really big.
in Dragonstone.
Have we ever seen dragon waste in this series?
As I said
Either
it,
this or Game of Thrones.
not that I recall.
Do you think it's like bird waste, or is it more like an animal's waste?
So you
Oh,
might be
like they
walking,
just have one hole, like a cloaca.
like, so people are walking in King's Landing and it's just like raining on them.
And it's like, oh no, it's good luck.
Eesh. All right, I guess if people are listening this far into the podcast, they know who we are, and they're not
Yeah.
going to be like, I can't listen to this.
Yeah, that's why we didn't lead with this.
Rhaenyra, as much as we wanted to. Well, Rhaenyra finds out what happened. Jaehaerys was killed. And they're saying I did this? Jace wants to fly out and keep watch for any movement from King's Landing in case anyone's coming, to get revenge after this Jaehaerys situation. Rhaenyra immediately says no. I assume to some extent she doesn't want Jace putting himself in danger after what happened to Luke. And this is really bad because we need loyalty to our cause, and now I'm a kinslayer. How is Rhaenyra related to Jaehaerys, by the way? He would be her half-nephew. Not going to go into more detail on
That's
that. You guys
barely
figure it out
related.
yourself. Yeah. And then throughout this whole thing, it's like, why are they saying I did this? This is insane. This is crazy. Then she looks at Daemon. He's got a little smile.
He's like, mm.
What happened?
Yeah.
So then just Rhaenyra and Daemon together, either they went somewhere else or cleared the room.
See, that's how you handle it. You wait till you can address it in private.
Yeah, you don't not like Aemond walking around yelling in front of everybody or Otto yelling in front of everybody. Here, she does it behind closed doors. And Daemon confesses what happened.
And it's not to say she has a right to be emotional and upset, but just strategically, you don't know what kind of outside effects it's going to have when you levy these accusations publicly. So
well, in the last time she had an
start small.
outburst. Yeah, and the last time she had an outburst, I want Aemond Targaryen. It resulted in Jaehaerys getting killed. So she's like, I got to be careful with this Daemon guy.
Yeah.
And he's, saying it was just an accident. And she says, well, wait a minute. If Aemond was not to be found, then what were your instructions? It felt very oddly specific, I thought, that question.
I still don't think that's an odd question. That's the natural question to ask after this happened.
I took it as intelligent. I was kind of impressed that she thought to ask it. But now I'm wondering, my bias is always to kind of find flaws. So now I'm wondering if it was too specific.
Well, I just feel like in real life, I wouldn't have thought of that so quickly. And maybe that's my problem. I would have been like, you told him to kill Jaehaerys. And he's like, no, I said to kill Aemond. And then I'd be like, And then later I would have been like, wait a minute. What if they didn't find Aemond? Then what did you tell them to do?
I've
never seen it before in an assassin situation. In my entire life, 34 years of watching movies and shows with assassins, I've never seen, here's your target. If you don't find that target, kill this person. So I would never think to ask about that situation.
But in this situation, she said to have somebody go kill Aemond, and then a different Targaryen gets killed. I feel like the natural question then is, did you tell them to kill somebody else if they didn't find Aemond? That to me seems super obvious.
It felt natural to me in the moment.
All right, I'll let it go. I feel like the question might have been how clear were your instructions? Not so specific as to parrot back to him word for word what occurred in the last. That's okay though. We don't have to litigate it. Rhaenyra decides that she can't trust him, and they get into a big argument. He knocks a cup off the table, and
Two cups.
I think it was a cup and the carafe or whatever thing he was pouring from. It was great. It was
in
a
different
1-2.
directions.
That's how mad he was. And She accuses him of using her to grasp at his stolen inheritance. That's what sets him off. And Rhaenyra says, you use this situation to indulge the darkness you keep sheathed within you like a blade. Daemon says, your father was afraid to be seen in my shadow. That's the only reason he made you queen. No, he was not afraid of you. He knew you couldn't be trusted. You're just like your father, afraid to spill blood in pursuit of greatness. You struck down a child. It was an accident. You're pathetic. And I will say, it's funny how on the green team, you have a bunch of children, Aemond, Aegon, calling for violence, making rash decisions. Their corollary on Team Black is Daemon. He's kind of like the child in this situation. Mm-hmm. So in a way, I did find him pathetic. And I guess, so there's an argument here over Viserys' motivation. There's an argument over Daemon's motivation. Starting with Viserys, they're arguing over why he picked Rhaenyra. We don't have to wonder. We can go to Viserys himself. There's a scene, I believe, in episode 3 last season. Remember that one episode where everyone kept coming up to him with marriage proposals? And so he just kept drinking. And then by the end of the day, he was so drunk, staring into the fire. And he tells Alicent why he named Rhaenyra. He says, he was really drunk. So he's like, oh, name's her. I named her to protect the realm from Daemon. Bing, that's points in Daemon's favor.
Yeah.
She was my only child, the realm's delight. I named her out of love because I no longer believed, that he was going to have a son as prophesied. So in that one statement, he kind of gives two different reasons. And so I think like everything else, it's a mix, right? On one hand, he was afraid of Daemon, but I think not for the reasons Daemon thinks. Daemon thinks that Viserys was afraid Daemon would be so good as a king, he would overshadow Viserys.
I don't think he was worried about
No, I think in truth, Viserys knew that making Daemon king would be like giving a chimp a machine gun. Another reference, so you can get that. Comment below. And then I think there was also love in there, but I think it was a very emotional decision. He didn't want to be estranged from Rhaenyra, so he chose her as heir. Partly, she was definitely a better option, I think, purely on merit, and who could be trusted to not have wanton violence and go crazy. But also, it was also emotional. I love my daughter. I can sense this rift forming, so I'm going to make her queen. And I think we had a debate over, was Viserys a bad king? And I think this is a pretty good example of it. One of the worst things you can have from a boss or a manager is when you don't know what they want. To this day, years after his death, they still don't know what he wanted, and they're still arguing over it. But I guess any other thoughts? Specifically, I'd be curious to hear what you guys think about Daemon. What is his motivation at this point? What is he trying to achieve?
That's a tough one. I think in part, revenge. In part, it's like he has something to prove that he can do what Viserys couldn't. I don't think he is motivated as simply as by something as simple as wanting power and like he wants to be king. I don't think that's what it is. I think it's much more personal. I think I was always so frustrated with Viserys's weakness, and I'm going to do what he couldn't and show that I was right, that what was missing was a firmer hand and someone who wasn't afraid of drawing blood.
I think that's true. I think, like everything, I think it's a mix. I think we talked a lot about how he was always trying to get Viserys' approval. Obviously, it's impossible to get that now. So he has this internal conflict. And I think this show has a lot of characters suffering internally. They don't know what to do with it. So they look for an external enemy. And I think for Daemon, this is an opportunity to do that. Like they killed, who did they kill? We killed Jaehaerys. Oh, wait, we killed Jaehaerys. What's he so upset about? Oh, they killed Luke. Everyone's dying, left to drop in like flies. It's hard to keep track. So now he's got this great externalized enemy, Team Green. I need to take them down, and there's probably a bit of I want to be as close to the throne as possible, but I think in the moment it's a very emotional thing. Of
Yeah.
revenge is a great way to just externalize his pain.
Well, and we've talked before about how, right, Daemon wanted Viserys' approval, and in some way getting like Rhaenyra's approval is sort of a proxy for that, but it's weird because Daemon is always also so self-destructive, right? Is he knows Rhaenyra wouldn't have wanted him to get Jaehaerys killed, right? So like why did he do that? Yeah, is it just because of his internal conflict makes him make bad decisions? Is he too driven by vengeance? I guess this is kind of what you were saying. It's kind of a mix of all these different motivations
And it
that
might
lead to erratic behavior.
He might have known there's no way Rhaenyra is going to approve of this, but it's going to just further inflame the war and leave her no choice but to act. So maybe for him it's win-win. Either she approves of it, great. Even if she doesn't, I have now furthered the rift between Team Green and Team Black. We got to go kill people. Baela gets called in by Rhaenyra. That's Baela, the daughter of Daemon and Laena. She orders her to take her dragon to keep watch on King's Landing. The job that Luke wanted, now she's giving it to Baela. She asks about Daemon. My father? Rhaenyra says he must follow his own path. Could be gone a week, could be gone forever. I don't know. And we see Daemon. He gets on a dragon and takes off. Where is he going? Well, Luke approaches Baela, who is practicing with a crossbow, and she asks where Daemon went. Luke assumes he went to Harrenhal. So Harrenhal is a castle in the Riverlands. Both sides have talked about it as an important place to get a toehold. Larys is like, not a foothold? Come on. They say that the path to King's Landing is through the Riverlands. So it seems like a geographically important position. Yeah. Aemond talked about it, and now Daemon is going there. So maybe we get some Daemon-Aemond action.
Now this is something I really have been wanting to look up, but am forbidding myself because I know it'll spoil stuff for me. But in the time of Game of Thrones, Harrenhal is considered like haunted and like bad luck, and basically there was this massive fire that killed a bunch of people, and it's seen as basically like the site of some horror that you got to avoid it. And I think it was almost like an insult to, I think Littlefinger was given command of Harrenhal, and it was almost like an insult to him, but he didn't mind because like that's just how he was. But
they talk about it like a cursed place. I think it's
cursed.
Like,
that's the word I was looking for.
It's all made of wood, so it lights up pretty easily. So that's where Larys lit his father and his brother Harwin on fire. And he's like, well, you know what they say about Harrenhal? Place just spontaneously combusts left and right.
So, but at this point in the series, Harrenhal is not seen as cursed yet, right?
They might have used that word. Like, I think there have been fires there before. It's not as haunted, and it doesn't have the same reputation it does in the time of Game of Thrones, but you see the beginnings of it.
Because I'm kind of expecting this series to show us the event that happens that causes it to have that reputation, and that's why I've been afraid to look it up.
Well, we'll see. They talk about fathers. Luke kind of had two fathers. Laenor, Baela's uncle, and his biological father, Harwin, and Jace says he misses Luke. Honestly, I don't have a whole lot to say on this scene, except that I've been waiting for Jace, Baela, for these children to become more full-fledged characters. I don't think we're quite there yet, but interested to see where we go.
Yeah, I do think that's going to be a big test for this show is as they start to get more and more screen time, does my investment increase?
Yeah. Well, then we meet.
I gotta go.
Time to go? All right.
Yeah.
You could do your Adam's gotta go. Adam, do you want to do your Dracarys?
Dracarys.
One Adam leaves and another enters because we see Adam approach Alan, the guy who works for Lord Corlys, the one who rescued him after his severe wound. And Adam's like, I hear Lord Corlys himself commended you for your service to him. You should use this as an opportunity to go sail with him, because they say those who sail with the sea snake make a fortune. something along those lines. Alan doesn't want to go, though, because he doesn't like war. So that's kind of where we leave it. I feel like these scenes are setting up for something. These scenes with Alan and now Adam, they haven't been that compelling so far, other than it's nice to see Alan, Abu Bakr Salim, because you and I were fans of Raised by Wolves, and now we get to see the actor who played Father back in the fold. Later in the episode, we see Adam again. Do you remember what happens? He picks up a crab off the beach. A dragon flies over him. Yeah, I was planning to ask. It was going to be you, Adam, and Alun. And I was going to make some jokes about how Adam and Alun kind of sounds like Adam and Alan. But I was going to ask, any of you idiots pick up on what was happening in that scene with Adam and the dragon? I mean, it's not. Yeah, well, basically that dragon is Sea Smoke. That's Laenor's dragon. Because Laenor faked his death. His dragon apparently has just been hanging out here. And Adam looks at it flying over him. Set up for something? We'll see. Corlys and Rhaenys, we cut to them. They talk about how Daemon has a hard time taking orders, but Corlys has found it to be quite enjoyable taking orders from Rhaenys. And they speculate, Rhaenys talks about how she felt the crown pass over her, and it's a hard thing to accept. Exactly what Daemon is going through. The crown passed over him. So Corlys is like, wait a minute, are you saying that Daemon's going to make a play for the crown? Not quite, Rhaenys clarifies. But she doesn't think he's going to want to take orders from Rhaenyra. And we're seeing some hints of that. I mean, more than hints. But she does say, if Daemon can take Harrenhal, where we presume he went, all may well be forgiven. So this is a nice scene to give us, I think, an update on Corlys and Rhaenyra and Rhaenys. They continue to be characters that I feel like are pretty moral, and especially once they stopped fighting for the throne. At the same time, that's been an easy position for them to be in. Essentially just setting up the blockade. They haven't had to do anything. They haven't had to take much action in this war yet. So we'll have to see where things go for them.
Well, I think the blockade, they're investing a lot into that.
Yes, I just think that's sort of a defense. It's technically an offensive position, but they're not going to kill people. They're not having to look people in the eye and fight them. And that was a decision that was made, and now they're executing it. They haven't had to make more decisions yet, and I feel like they haven't been really morally tested in a while.
Yeah.
I think also this is just another moment they're really trying to emphasize Harrenhal. We need a toehold there. Daemon is trying to go get it. Aemond has talked about it. So Harrenhal is important. So important that it would put Daemon in Rhaenyra's good graces if he could get it. Rhaenyra speaks with Mysaria. Is another scene of someone yelling at her and her defending herself. It's just transactional. I told Daemon about blood and cheese. I had no choice. It was the price of my freedom. Rhaenyra stares at her and suddenly remembers she was the one on the bridge, the one that Daemon was pretending to marry. Then Mysaria gives another monologue about her life. She had to find a way to make money, earn her living bit by bit. Then the Hightower set it on fire. But she no longer wishes to be of consequence. These royal people, they will never accept me. How did you get that scar? Rhaenyra asks. And Mysaria just walks out, doesn't answer.
Yeah, what was that again?
The actress has a scar, so I guess they finally just decided to acknowledge it in the show. I'm just kidding. That's not true.
Okay.
So in season 1, actually, if you go back, she's always wearing necklaces or cloaks or capes, things that cover up her neck. Then by the end of the season, once she's gotten more power, like when she meets with Otto to say, like, I have Aemond or I have Aegon. You want him? We got to make a deal here. You got to stop the child fighting ring in King's Landing. And remember, I'm the one who handed over Aegon. Once she has more power, she stops covering up her neck. And you can see she does have that scar there. But what is it exactly? I assume it's something that came from her difficult early life where she was probably a slave and just, I don't know if there's more to it or if it's just, here's a visual sign of my, where I came from and what I had to fight for. Later on, we see Rhaenyra freeze Mysaria because she says, I don't know if I trust you. I still sense some danger in you yet, but a deal's a deal. I will honor the deal that my house made with you. Daemon said he'd set you free in exchange for blood and cheese, so I'm going to set you free. Sends her to Myr, which, by the way, is where Varys in Game of Thrones, that's where he was castrated. So I'm worried for her. And he sends her out with Eric. So her and Eric are walking outside, and on the way out, Mysaria notices the other Eric approaching.
She's not walking with Eric. Eric escorts her out of that room. Remember, she's walking with some random guy. But yeah. She knows that Eric, is still in the castle, and then she sees this other Eric.
Right. Eric begins to walk. Yeah, and then she goes out. She sees the other Eric and then calls out, "A moment." So later, when the good Eric shows up, I assume it's because Mysaria warned someone who warned him. And then, this all builds up to that sneaky castle kill. I'll say that when Eric is sneaking in, I probably felt more tension than I did during the blood and cheese sequence in episode 1. I feel the stakes are lower because in episode 1, when Daemon asks, when they ask Daemon, "What if we don't find Aemond? What do we do?" I immediately start to think someone's dying here. I just don't know who. Here, if they're going to kill Rhaenyra, I was doubtful they're really going to kill her. And I was like, who else is in this castle that they would even possibly kill? So I was like, it's Rhaenyra or no one. So I was feeling tension, even though the stakes weren't quite as high. It felt, as absurd as it is, this whole plot with the twins, I was like, it does make sense. He looks just like him. And they all wear the same cloaks. So it was a little less contrived to me. So it felt more real, and I was tense. I knew something bad was going to happen. The two Erics are fighting each other. There's that great moment we alluded to earlier when the guard is like, "Wait, which one's Eric?" Which I thought was funny because even if you answer the question, it's still not helpful. What did you think of this whole scene? I guess I'll just say how it ends. Right? The two Erics fight each other. Eric kills Eric. So Rhaenyra's Eric kills Alicent's Eric. And then he feels so bad he's a kinslayer. And so he kills himself. What did you think of this scene, Daniel?
I mean, generally I liked it. The whole lead up was tense, and the fighting scene was also very tense and sort of savage and brutal. I was really disappointed that the Eric killed himself after. I didn't see that coming. And that just feels like a shame. It's not his fault for being a kinslayer. It's also just so frustrating. Don't you think they could have settled their differences?
Well, I kept thinking if I was Alicent's Eric, after all that crap from Cole and all the chaos in that castle, I would have been like, yeah, I'll do it. I'll kill Rhaenyra. I would go over to Dragonstone, and then I would be like, look, I've switched sides. Your side is better, and I would just team up with he should just team up with his brother.
Well, and isn't it funny? It's like they both see each other as traitors. I mean, the whole rift, it's like, come on, it's just an error of reasoning. If they could sit down, they'd hash it out. They'd really investigate the law and say, oh, you're right. I guess based on that, it really should be Rhaenyra, right? Why do they have to kill each other over this?
Yeah. It's, I will say, so in the Game of Thrones, the Song of Ice and Fire books, they apparently make reference to this event. Everybody knows the story of the two twins, the Erics, killing each other. It's like a legendary moment. I would say seeing it play out, it didn't feel like it should grow into this legendary thing. It felt more like slightly less than Blood and Cheese, just a real screw up. On the official podcast, they talk about it almost like a Shakespearean tragedy. These two brothers who really care for each other, really love each other. But honestly, for me, I definitely felt the tension, and it was an emotionally effective scene. But I never really felt like these two Erics were real characters. I feel like they were around. We didn't really get much from them until the end of season 1 when they split sides. And I always just saw it. They're not that developed as characters. So it was more of a thematic thing that even two people who were raised in a similar way, they shared a soul or two souls in one body. and they can end up on two sides of this war. So it's a way to say there is no good side or bad side. If the two Erics can split up, anybody can. So I almost felt like if they had been further developed as characters, this could have been, in addition to a tense and exciting scene, could have been a tragic one. And it kind of was. I don't know. I didn't feel as much as at least the folks on the official podcast did.
Yeah, that's true. I didn't feel like I enjoyed the scene, but I didn't feel that invested in the characters. Which again, this is kind of what we keep coming back to. Is it's like it's just so much happening. Like if they just slowed things down, they gave us more time with both of them, they developed them more, a lot of these things would hit much better.
Yeah, I feel the same way with Massaria. It's like she could be an interesting character. Like in any other context, she would be, considering where she started, where she's gotten to. She's lost a lot of what she had, and she's going through a lot. But it's what I said earlier, where we are only seeing the essentials of her life. We check in with her every once in a while. She gives a monologue that updates her on her status, reminds us of where she came from. But to me, she doesn't feel like a character who's living her life, and we're just seeing it from time to time. Instead, it feels like she is conjured into existence when we need her, and then she goes away. And don't feel that to the same extent as the Erics, because they have been around, but it would have been cool if they got developed further. Like in Game of Thrones, I mean, it's almost a cliche at this point, but one of the things that made it so effective and popular is that you would get invested in characters. You would think somebody's a main character, and then they would be killed. We haven't really had that in this show. Plenty of people have been killed, and you feel empathy for them. Like Luke is a child, so seeing him get killed is awful, but we haven't actually had a character we connect with, follow as a main character, and then watch them killed. Viserys, of course, but that's a little bit different. That was a slow thing that we approached. It wasn't a surprise in any way, and it wasn't an act of violence. It wasn't not unexpected in any way. But I think it's fair to say both of us quite enjoyed this episode. Even just looking at the length of this podcast, we had a lot to sink our teeth into, a lot to talk about. Liked it better than the premiere, and I'm excited to see the next episode. Do you have any final thoughts, Daniel?
Yeah, I mean, going back to what I said at the beginning about how I felt a little bored, this is what I expected in that as we talked through it, I got excited about it. Like there were a lot of interesting things that happened, and it's fun to talk about. I think the piece that's just missing is just not feeling that invested in the characters, not feeling as invested in the events that are happening as I could be. And I think that's it. And, I don't know. We'll see how that develops. As the show is doing a lot of things well, and it has a lot of really interesting things happening. The plot is interesting. I just hope they can find a way to get me to feel more invested.
All right. On that note, I think we can wrap it up there. So let's do a little bit of a business, a little bit of house announcements. Go ahead.
Oh, I was getting ready to do Dracarys. Sorry.
Oh, no, this will be quick. Just a couple of things to look out for later this week. So Thursday night at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Or is it Eastern? Are we in daylight savings? How about this? 7 p.m. Eastern Time. There's a channel called Hack the Movies, which I've mentioned before, where this guy, Tony, good friend of mine, does a podcast reviewing movies. And once a month, he does a live monthly wrap-up talking about different movies and shows that have come out in the month, and we kind of have a panel discussion about it. I'm going to be on the panel. So Thursday night, 7 p.m., I'll put a link to his channel. So if you want to tune in and see a live stream where I talk about different movies and shows from this month. And then on this channel, the One Take Podcast channel, where we post Talking Targaryen, if you're just listening, there's a link to that YouTube channel in the show notes. We do a semi-regular podcast where we talk about different movies, news, things going on in our lives. And after those Hack the Movies live streams, the next morning I always record a play-by-play. We look back on it. Who was the best panelist? What could I have done differently? What was the worst moment of the panel? We we analyze it. So if you want kind of a two-parter, tune into the live stream and then make sure you subscribe to the One Take Podcast channel so you can listen to the podcast. With that, I'm Gil.
I'm Daniel.
Dracarys.
Dracarys.